John, thanks for joining us on Total Rugby. First of all, can you explain to all of our listeners who might not be aware of the latest developments just what has been announced?
There was the annual meeting of the IRB Council yesterday in Dublin. The approval was given to the recommendation from the Scrum Steering Group to change the Scrum engagement process, to trial the new Scrum engagement process. Now, this happened back in about 2009, I think we started the process of measuring it or trialling the impact, because the force of the hit is just getting bigger and bigger and more dangerous as the game went professional. And we commissioned the research at Bath University, and the first part of that trial was just measuring the impact of force on a scrumming machine, one live pack against a scrumming machine. The second stage of the trial was to measure the impact between two packs. And now this was the old, you've got to remember, this was the old sequence, which was this crouch, touch, pause, engage. And then that was changed yet again to crouch, touch, engage, which was changed from crouch, touch, engage to crouch, touch, set. And then finally, the last one we trialled on that level was the crouch, bind, engage, which means you crouch, you touch the opposition, and when you touch them, you bind, and then when the referee says right, you engage. Now, it was seen from the Scrum Steering Group that that was reducing the impact by 25%, producing a more stable scrum. So we asked that to be trialled, and the Pacific Rugby Championship very kindly trialled that impact for us in the live competition. And the feedback we got was very favourable. So we've asked Scrum Steering Group, were unanimous in putting that forward, so we put that forward to the IRB Council, who also unanimously approved it yesterday. So that will go live as of 1st of August in the Northern Hemisphere and the start of the Southern Hemisphere. The new engagement process will be crouch, bind, set. So it's done purely, it's very exciting from our point of view, because it's getting to the end of the research, and IRB have spent almost £500,000 on this research.
Why was the change needed? Was it primarily player welfare, or was it primarily to get back to a better contest at the scrum?
Oh, no, it was purely, when it was instigated in 2009, it was purely done for a player welfare. And that is how we are going to judge the success of this trial. There's certain measurements and evaluations how we're going to do it. And obviously the collapsed scrums are the major guide to us doing that. We're looking for at least a 70% completion of scrum rate to gauge it by success. And you might not think that is very much, but when you think in the Six Nations this year, there was only a 40% completion of scrums with collapsed scrums. So it's done purely from a player welfare point of view, but obviously if there is the side effects of the fact that because it's a better stable scrum, we get more completion, it's more attractive to watch, then hopefully it's a win-win scenario.
Now, it says in the press release that coupled with this, the IRB are going to instruct referees to ensure the ball does not enter the tunnel unless the scrum is square and stationary, and that a straight throw-in is strictly policed. Can we believe this?
As chairman of the referees, I can assure you they are being asked to implement that. What has happened over the last 2 or 3 seasons has purely been because of player welfare. The referees have been too busy watching the binding. The referees have let some of the feed go a bit crooked, should we say, and it's become more of a shoving competition between two teams. So the modern day coaches didn't mind that happening when you spoke to them, but the law says quite clearly it has to go down the middle and the scrum has to be stationary and stable. So we have asked the referees to police that, and they will do that from the start. It will be slightly different for the referees because they've not been used to doing that, but they've been concentrating on the binding. So they're still going to have to concentrate on the binding at the scrum engagement, but they're also definitely going to enforce a straight feed, and scrum half will not be allowed to put the ball into the scrum until the scrum is stable and stationary.
Well, the reaction so far has been hugely positive. I think all players and fans have been slightly fed up with what's been going on at scrums. We had a comment on Twitter. It's from Peter McGurk. He said, hookers might need to hook again. That would be an added benefit from this as well, wouldn't it?
Hookers will have to hook again, and we're hoping the scrum becomes a contest like it was in the past. Will there be a change in the shape of the hookers back to the old-fashioned ones who are bending to hook? I don't know, but the name itself, as you say, the number 2 position in a rugby team is called the hooker. Why is he called the hooker? Because he hooks for the ball. He's not a pusher, he's not a shover, he's a hooker. So, yes, we're hoping. At the end of the day, what we want to do is make sure that rugby still is a game for all shapes and sizes. We're not trying to depower the scrum. We still want the scrum to be a contest, but we want it to be a safe contest and one that's exciting.
Really, it's just refereeing the laws as they are currently in the law book.
That's exactly what it is. We're not changing. There's not a change in law there. The only change in the law is the engagement process itself, and that is a global trial, which will then come back to the Scrum Steering Group for assessment as the year goes on. Now, there are checks in the trial if there was going to be less than 70% completion of scrums as we on go, or if there's an increase in the number of injuries, then there are checks where we will stop the trial. But if the trial is proven to be successful, it will continue for both the Northern Hemisphere season, Southern Hemisphere season, then it will come and get reviewed by the Scrum Steering Group, and hopefully, if it's a success, it will then become law in November, at the Interim Council meeting in November 2014.
Now, your old 1989 Lions colleague Brian Moore always has a lot to say on this. Are you hoping that he's going to be calmed down a bit?
Will we ever calm Muro down? Look, Brian has been an advocate of putting the ball down the middle and hookers being allowed to hook and strike and safety as well. So hopefully, and I'm pretty sure he will be approval of the process. As I say, having had a debate on the radio with him a month ago, he was adamant we should be going down that line. I couldn't really say anything at that point until it was passed by the Scrum Steering Group and by the IRB Council itself. I was hoping that we would get a favourable reaction. And I would think Brian's will be favourable as well. What we've now got to do is make sure we all work together to make sure it is a success. Now, the success of it is purely on a player welfare aspect. But if the side effect is the fact that it's more entertaining and more attractive, and we go back to hookers hooking for the ball, then we're all for that.
Does this change go through all levels of rugby? It's not just at the elite level?
I think it's fair to say the majority of the problems at scrum time are at the elite level. When you go down, I go to a lot of what they call the community rugby. I go to a lot of games community rugby, and I don't find there's many collapse scrums. There is one or two. So I don't think it's as big a problem at that level as it is at the elite level. I think there's a huge problem at the elite level. And dare I say it, probably more of a problem at the elite level in the Northern Hemisphere than there is to the Southern Hemisphere. But no, these global law changes are for all levels of rugby, from the top to the bottom. So that will be the engagement process for community rugby as well. And what we're going to do before the start of the season, we will be having workshops with coaches, with players, with referees, with media as well, to make sure they understand what we're expecting from the process and how we're going to work through. Because let's not forget ourselves here, there's going to be a huge change to a lot of these people, and they need time to bed it in. So we're going to do them well before pre-season starts and the pre-season games, so that hopefully the educational package will be there to make this trial successful and safe.
Well, that's good news. I mean, the props in my vets team, they like to have a rest in the scrum.
Well, they'll still be allowed to do that. We've got to remember, when these engagement process, actually, they talk about winning the hit and winning the push and the shove. Well, it's actually, if you read the law book, it's actually illegal to shove before the ball comes in. So the new process will let your props at your level have a rest before the ball comes in, and then they can shove after that.
I mean, that's interesting. And I saw that was also in the release. I mean, I'll read it to you. A front row must not form at a distance from its opponents and rush against them or pull them. There will be no charging. So we're taking the hit out, aren't we?
Well, the hit is actually illegal anyway, as I say, by the law book. So the actual hit is probably taken out. Yes, it's an engagement process. It's, as I say, it's crouch, bind, set now. So the actual sheer velocity of the hit has been removed from the process, yes.
We had a comment on Twitter. It's from at First15. He said, will scrums become much more like they used to be pre-professionalism? I
think they will be. I appreciate the concern that's built up over the last couple of years about this, and it really has become almost a blight on our game, collapse scrums. But we were very conscious of we had signed up to this process, this trial, and as you know, it's a huge investment from the IRB, and for the correct reasons, for player welfare, that we could not rush that trial through. We had to do the trial right through the proper process. While we'd like to have jumped a year to try and improve it, to get the results quicker, we've got to do it properly. It has to be properly evaluated. So that's why it has taken so long. It's not because the IRB or anybody or the lawmakers are dragging their heels. It's because the process was clearly set out. So for those of us who have been involved, especially those that have been involved from the start, and I wasn't involved at the start, it's really exciting times because we're seeing the end of this trial. And hopefully our hopes and aspirations are going to come to fruition. So it's a very exciting time.